Hello, everybody. My name is Hawk, and yes, I am back. It has been, I believe, over a year, or maybe just about a year, since I last uploaded to my channel. And all I'm going to say to that is, at the very beginning, I told you guys my upload schedule would be when I felt like it. And so, this is when I feel like it, and none of the other times in the last year were that. But anyway, that being said, I'm happy to be back, and I figured for my first video being back, I would give you guys the mother of all videos, the Divide and Conquer faction tier list. Instead of taking all of the units and ranking them from one faction, I was going to put all the factions together and tier list each one of them based on my experiences with the game, and also trying to look at them holistically to maybe move them a tier up or down or two. Obviously, this is going to be completely based on my experiences with the game and my opinions of the factions, and like I said, I'll try to look at different strengths and weaknesses of each one a little bit more objectively, but at the end of the day, I'm going to put the factions that I like high and the factions that I don't like low, and your favorite faction might get put at the bottom, your least favorite faction might get put at the top, and that's fine. I think one of the beautiful parts of this game, and why we all love playing it so much, and why we're all so active in the community, is that it's a very deep game, and there's something for everyone involved. The orc lovers, the elf lovers, the human lovers, we all get to have fun in this game. So, with that being said, I just want to give you guys a quick rundown of the tiers because it has been a while. S tier at the top, obviously this is going to be the cream of the crop. This is going to be the best of the best, my favorite factions in the entire game. A tier, very, very good. I think these are all super strong factions, but they're just not my absolute favorites. B tier, they're above average. I think B tier are good factions. They are fun and worth playing, and I would play them again. C tier, I just think they're average. I don't think they're bad, but I don't think they're amazing. I think they're all right. D tier, I think they're a little below average. I think they might, maybe use some work, or maybe it's just not my cup of tea, but for whatever reason, I don't really enjoy the faction that much. F tier, I don't think these factions are good, just straight up. I think they need a lot of work, or it's just not enjoyable for whatever reason. And so, yeah, that's all of the tiers. One more thing just to mention is that I did get a new mic, as you may notice, which is honestly part of the motivation that I've had for recording this video. So, yeah, enjoy my voice in high definition audio, I suppose. But anyway, with all that rambling out of the way, let's just get started with the quintessential Divide and Conquer faction. Where were they when the Westfold fell? It is Gondor coming through as our first one, and Gondor is a great faction for me, and I think for everybody. They're extremely popular. They've got a very diverse roster. There is so much to enjoy about Gondor that it's kind of hard to take a lot away from them. So I think for me, they're going to go in B tier, and it's like, what, Hawk, you just talked them up a lot, and I know, but I think Gondor is kind of a lot to play, and so I don't know, it's not my favorite. They have a really large starting domain, and they have the war with Mordor, and that's two of the things that make them super iconic, but also it's not like my favorite thing either. I kind of like starting a little bit smaller. I like, kind of having more options in the game, and so I think Gondor is while their campaign does exactly what it means to do, with probably the biggest roster in the game, or it is the biggest roster in the game, with all the fiefdom units that they can get. They have very, very diverse and elite infantry. They have decent cavalry, decent archers. There's so much available to them that their roster really means that all the battles that you're fighting are continuously going to be fresh. But you are fighting a lot of battles. It can be a bit of a drag. You start super big, and there's a lot of cheesy strategies too that I try not to employ, but you might see from time to time, like with continually seizing East Osgiliath to make sure that Mordor can attack you in the West Osgiliath, general stacking Caer Andros to try to just hold it forever, stuff like that. It can be a little bit of a drag. It can draw itself out a little bit. So they're not really one of my favorite factions, but with that being said, I cannot deny Gondor is a very good faction, which is why they're getting B. They're above average. I definitely think that they're great. Now, moving on to Dol Amroth, this is interesting, because I'm just going to tell you guys straight up, Dol Amroth is one of my favorite factions in terms of, aesthetic. Their units and roster look amazing. They're extremely elite. I love the whole idea behind the faction. I think this is just better Gondor for me. I love playing Dol Amroth. But the thing with Dol Amroth is that at least in 4.6. And I will be including 4.6 and V5 because I have access to the beta. So I've played these factions on the ongoing beta build of version 5. So I will throw in my 2 cents on that as well. So in version 4.6, Dalamroth is honestly not very fun to play. I love the faction aesthetically and like their starting location, the seafaring thing. I love the building ships, being on the coast, the area, super amazing. But being caught in a 3v1, 4v2 kind of situation there with Gondor backed up against a wall, you're kind of forced to rush Umbar. And that's so boring to me. That makes the campaign extremely easy. You just rush Umbar, take it. You're no longer getting Corsair rated. And you just are all of a sudden economic powerhouse. It basically takes Ardanaim out of the game. And that means you're just in a 2v1 against Harad and Khan, which is generally manageable. I don't enjoy that though, but you're sort of forced to do it in version 5 because in the 3v1, your units are too expensive for you to actually hold at the Straits of the Anduin without running out of money because it's just like these crappy little towns. Like Tir Thoros is like a keep, and then I actually forget the name of the town, but the one north of it's on the coast, south of the Straits of Anduin. I'm forgetting the name of the town, but that's just a town is my point. So it's really crappy settlements down there. And it's hard to hold with, even with your amazing bodyguards that people like to complain are OP, but in my opinion, they're the only thing that keeps Dalamroth campaign afloat, and they're extremely fun to use. Like, without those OP bodyguards, you'd be screwed. It's just impossible. And then with the Corsair raids also in version 4.5, it's super annoying. It's just not fun. So, now looking forward to version 5, I think a lot of these issues have actually been rectified. You now start with a Thelen, so you don't have to waste your first 3-ish turns, marching over to a Thelen, sieging it, then marching units away. I mean, by the time your units get to the front lines, you've probably wasted about 5 turns marching there and back. That's a lot of money for your expensive units. It's a lot of time that you could have been using to move south and fortify your borders, right? Now you start with a Thelen, which means more money off the bat, less time wasted trying to take it, as well as Corsair invasions have been removed. So rushing Umbar is not mandatory anymore, and I think it makes the campaign extremely fun. It's the Dol Amroth experience that I think most Dol Amroth fans have always wanted, where you are the gatekeeper of the south. You are defending Gondor. In the campaign I played of them on version 5, I was holding the south very rigidly with my units, and Gondor lost Caer Andros, so I marched a unit over there to Caer Andros and took it with Imrahil. I've been holding and kind of going on an offensive against Mordor over there, holding Caer Andros, fighting at Minas Morgul, while also holding off Harad and Ardanaim. And it's a very slow campaign, kind of similar to Gondor in a lot of cases, but it was, I don't know, it felt a little bit more dynamic to me, and also they had the roster to back it up. So, with this all being said, Dalamroth's going to rank an A tier for me, because on version 5, they're an S tier. But in the condition that they're currently on for the vast majority of your all's games, I think that there's a lot to be desired in terms of gameplay for them. So it sort of holds them back from the S tier. So I think they're an amazing faction. I absolutely love Dalamroth, but there are problems with the campaign. Now, to close out the Dunedin, we do have the Dunedin of Arnor. This is another iconic faction. Beacon of Hope recruitment. You got the Rangers, you got Aragorn, you've got Gandalf, 2 amazing characters. Halbarad, also a total beast with his steel bows. The roster's really cool. I think the whole aesthetic is cool. You start off as a little bit more like Wildman Ranger, and then once you get to your top tier buildings, you're fully Gondorian in a lot of your aesthetics, your armor upgrades even. You get a lot more plate. Beautiful roster. They're really fun to play. Elite units. It's a difficult campaign, but I don't think it's too hard. I'm not a huge fan of how you have to rush Moria, but it is what it is. It's at least thematic. The Rangers kind of going on an adventure to slaughter the goblins in the mountains. So there's nothing else to say. I mean, I think the Dunedin of Arnor is one of the best factions in the game, easily. There's so many good things going for this campaign. I don't think I've ever really heard of anyone not liking this campaign, except for, a few of our Angmar fans in the Discord server, which shout out to you guys. Reaper, you know who you are, right? But that being said, I mean, Dunedin, they're a fun campaign. There's so many good things about it. And I think in terms of like thematics, aesthetics, it's one of the best. Now we've got our Northmen factions. As you can see, I've grouped up the factions by sort of culture. So we did the Dunedin first. Now we're going to move on to the Northmen. Coming to Rohan. And Rohan is so interesting to me because I think thematically they're a really fun faction because it's just Rohan from, you know, the movies and the books that we know and love so well. It's just Rohan. But gameplay-wise, they're so mediocre. Rohan is so disappointing to me. I want to enjoy this faction more than I do so badly, but fighting Isengard is honestly not that fun. It's either too easy or a huge slog, and there's not really in between. I think there's something that needs to be done. I had a suggestion once of having an army locked on the bridge at Fords of Isen that Isengard starts with that can't move, that you have to defeat before, you know, being able to get to Isengard, unless you wanted to take the long way around. And I think that could solve a problem. But either way, being able to rush across the Fords of Isen and just take Isengard instantly, I think is so not fun, but like also the obvious thing to do. And then outside of that, Rohan doesn't really have any cool gameplay stuff. They've got the Theoden script, but there's not really much there. There's talks of giving Rohan something in version 5, but I don't think that's going to end up happening. At least if it is, it hasn't happened yet, so I haven't played with it. So there's just so much to be desired, and I think their roster is also a little bit outdated. It's one of the most similar rosters to Third Age Total War, the original, and while those units look good and it's a good roster, it's still a little bit dated looking, and it feels that way. Units aren't that good, very cavalry focused. I enjoy cavalry a lot, but I think Rohan just leaves a lot to be desired, which sucks because Éomer, Theoden, so many characters, so thematic, I think, because they're really one of the iconic factions, but the Horse Lords just don't quite cut it in my eyes. But you know who does cut it, and is surprisingly an extremely fun faction, is the Vale of Anduin, especially after the updates that they've gotten in version 5. I think they have a really cool looking roster. I think Hummingbird, it was really one of the last major contributions he made to the mod, and absolutely knocked it out of the park, in my opinion. The units really look great. I think that the whole, the little like minor scripts that they got with like the mountain watchtower things, being able to build different buildings, getting your you have a sort of an archery, infantry, or cavalry focus depending on which way you decide to build up. There's like the Aethiode, the Bjornings, and I'm forgetting the last one, but anyway, depending on which one you decide to focus on in each settlement, that's sort of your military focus, and so you can focus on different things in different settlements, and I think it's just a lot of nice flavor to their gameplay. They're not an iconic faction at all. They're actually one of the very fictional factions in Divide and Conquer, but I think that there's just a lot of interesting things about this faction that make them worth playing, and with the version 5 updates, I think they're a lot of fun. They're definitely not like a top-tier faction, but it's a good faction. There's really nothing to complain about on that front. Now we come to Dale, and I really like Dale. Nope, not that high. I don't like Dale that much. I really like Dale, but they're not S tier. But Dale will make it into A tier for me. Dale has an awesome looking roster. The Hearthguards look super good. All like the Ravanian units look amazing. Laketown Pikemen are super iconic. Iwothiada Horse Guard, awesome looking unit. There's just like a lot going from them. The Royal Guard, you know, also super cool, right? Like I could just go on forever. I think Dale's roster is actually one of the better looking ones in the game. Also a jack of all trades faction, which I enjoy. I like archers, I like cavalry, and I like infantry, and I like pretty decent quality units, which Dale has. I think their roster honestly is one of the major things that boosts them so much for me. Is I think their roster is just super super fun, and their campaign's fun. You know, you start poor, you kind of got to dig your economy out, and after that you get to fight Rune and you fight Dol Guldur. I think Rune's actually a fun enemy because they kind of are on par with you. Dol Guldur, little easy, but you know, that's life. And there's, you know, not a whole lot in terms of like scripts to this campaign, and that is probably what holds it out of S. Is it's a pretty vanilla campaign, but I just think it's a fun campaign. I think there's nothing wrong with a vanilla campaign if it's enjoyable, and Dale's truly is. There's a lot to do. I think it's just a solid way to play the game, and I highly recommend Dale for anyone that hasn't played them, because I think they kind of fly under the radar a little bit as a fun faction. Now we come to Darwinian, though, and as many of you may know, Darwinian is my favorite faction in the entire game. This faction is a masterpiece, in my opinion. Roster is just perfect. They have the human choice and the elf choice, both of which are very rewarding to play. I think I generally prefer the elf choice, but I think the human choice is also extremely fun. The roster looks amazing. I mean, the Morroquindi units are awesome, and they're super good. The Morroquindi protectors and the Sentinels are amazing. Nurwe is one of my favorite custom generals in the entire game. He absolutely carries every single Darwinian campaign I play. I think they have a very fun starting location. I like playing with a good economy, honestly, because then you just get to fight a lot. Rune is, as I just said for Dale, a fun enemy. They start very strong, so they pose a bit of a threat. And while the campaign's not super challenging, it is just challenging enough to be entertaining, because if you're not careful, Rune can get really strong, and you have to play intelligently. You can't let Dol Guldur also threaten you from the backside as well, because if you find yourself in a two-front war against Dol Guldur and Rune, you'll be in a world of hurt. So I think that there's a lot going for this faction that kind of flies under the radar a little bit. And yeah, it's a hell of a lot of fun. And in version 5 too, I should talk about those changes. This faction has gotten such a tremendous amount of flavor added to them, and it's absolutely incredible. With the whole Morthanel script, the way they have now flavored the Morroquindi, it's basically they're always mixed into your population, but you go and help them reclaim Morthanel, which is an ancient Ivari city. And once you reclaim Morthanel, that's when the script fires, instead of just at a static turn 42, I believe it was. And so the script fires, you make your choice, elves or men, and it's basically whether or not the flavor for the choice is not if you're sending the Ivari away, but it's about whether you want the Ivari to help you in your military or you're in your economy. And so if they're the military, obviously it's the elf choice, economy, human choice, right? And it just creates it creates so much flavor. I think Morthanel was an amazing addition to the game. The roster looks amazing. It's just a fun campaign. I cannot understate how enjoyable Darwinian is. They're just all around a very entertaining faction, and I have to recommend this to every single person that plays the game. It's so much fun to play as this faction. I've played with them more than any faction, and I think they were on the top 5 most populars, which brought a huge smile to my face to see that they are getting recognition as a great faction. Anyway, sorry, I just took a sip of water there, but we come to our cross pipes. Breland, it's going to be 2-2-2-2 so far in ABCS, but Brey, they're fun. I don't think there's too much to be said here. I like their roster aesthetically and thematically. I don't really like playing with it because it's pretty bad, honestly. But they're a fun faction. Their economy starts terrible, but it gets pretty good. You fight Dunedin and Enenwaith for the most part, which is all right. This faction can kind of be as hard or as easy as you want it to be. In terms of if you fight Enenwaith right away alongside Dunedin, it's actually kind of difficult. But if you only fight Dunedin, it's usually pretty easy. Yeah, but your roster is not super cool. I think thematically, Brey has a lot going for it. I think it is a well-fleshed-out faction, and it's more just not my cup of tea, but I think, there's nothing that would be added to this faction to make them better for me, personally, and I know that they're very popular amongst other people, so Brey, for me, is an average faction. They're good, but not great, in my opinion. But now we've got the Elves, having gotten the Northmen, and I threw Brey in with the Northmen to separate them from the other Wildmen, but coming to the Elves now, we've got Woodland Realm, and this is probably going to be a little controversial in terms of the whole Elven rankings that we do, but I'm going to put Woodland Realm in B tier here with Gondor and Anduin, and there's a lot of mixed reviews on this campaign. Your economy is awful. Yeah, it's so bad, and you're basically fighting Dol Guldur, and you absolutely massacre them, but you're sort of gated by your economy, so you can't just field armies of elves to wipe them off the face of the earth. Making it, not super challenging, but it does pose a bit of a threat, especially if Gundabad gets involved. Now with the addition of Gundabad, I think it actually adds an extra bit of difficulty to Woodland Realm, because you have to be a little bit careful. You can't just let Gundabad, rock up on your northern border without being prepared. And you have the Elven Alliance script as well. In version 5, you can also choose to combine with Lorien using the Kalmar Union script, which is very cool. It's a fun bit of flavor. I don't think it's an amazing script, but it's good. And I think one of the main reason I really enjoy Woodland Realm is I really like having OP archers. Honestly, it's just fun. It's not hard, but it's fun. So you just get to murder everything with your archers. I think the aesthetic too of the Elven Kings units are amazing. I would like to see the old Here and Ek and the Here Ilang make a return. The swords and the spears. I mean, the glaives are cool. I don't really like the axe guard though, if I'm being honest. So I'd like to see those make a return. But Theoden and Thranduil, that's not right. Legolas and Thranduil, also really fun generals. Henny Dower, one of my favorite units in the game. They're unbelievably OP. So, I think they're fun. I think there's a lot going for this campaign, but I can sort of understand why a lot of people would find them boring because it is pretty linear. It's pretty one-dimensional, and if you don't like archers, then you're just not going to enjoy this campaign, and you're not going to have money the entire time. Moving on to Lorien. Lorien's a C-tier faction for me. There's nothing bad about them. I just think that they're Woodland Realm, but worse. Because they're a little bit more of a jack of all trades in terms of their units. Their archers are a little bit worse, and their infantry is better. And that's basically it. So I would rather spec more into archers. I think specialized factions can be a little bit more fun. I also think Woodland Realm's starting location is more interesting than Lorien's. I think Lorien is easier. I don't like Celeborn and, what's his name? You know, the March Warden. I don't like Celeborn and that guy. Oh, man, I'm so disappointed I don't remember his name. But I don't like him and Celeborn as much as I like Legolas and Thranduil as well. Despite the Barrio E. Englaith being an amazing unit. They look super cool. But that's that. Now the final Elven faction. We're going to get another one in A tier here. It's the High Elves. High Elves are awesome. They're super fun. They're a very easy faction. But there's a lot of flavor involved. I think all of the custom generals that they get just make this campaign super interesting. They have a really good roster. I feel like when you play this faction, you're sort of the ultimate fighters of Sauron as well, as the High Elves are meant to be. You know, meant to destroy Isengard, you're meant to destroy Sauron. The two Maiar that sort of threaten the balance of Middle-earth the most. So Split Domain's also cool. You've got Mithlond and Círdan over there just chilling, making you a lot of money. I think gameplay-wise, this faction isn't super amazing, but it's fun enough. And the scripts that they get, like I said, with the custom generals, as well as the new recruitment that they have with the Sindar barracks and the Teleri barracks, as it's called, and the Noldor barracks, not being able to get those everywhere, both of them being gated by different things, with the Teleri barracks water, and the Noldor barracks, I believe, being in grasslands and forests, or grasslands and mountains. I always forget exactly what it is, but it means that you don't get all your units everywhere, and you want to be a little bit more strategic about what you're taking. So lots of fun. I think it's a good campaign. It's a decent starter campaign if you can navigate your way out of the early financial troubles, because it ends up becoming pretty easy after maybe like turn 15. Once you build your mines in Mithlond, really it gets going. So we've got the two quintessential Wildman factions now. Enedwaith for me is a C tier faction. I actually played Enedwaith pretty recently, and it's fun. I don't think the version 5 changes, I'll just start off with that, were that like massive for Enedwaith. They changed a lot of things. They completely overhauled the roster, and there is more flavor in the campaign now, but I think thematically it still feels pretty similar to me. So it doesn't really move it up a tier. It's just a fun faction to play. You know, you got pretty trash units, but they're very ambush focused. Lots of javelins still. And that is definitely a unique playstyle, which is what gives Enedwaith a lot of points for me in my book, is just that they have a very unique playstyle compared to all these factions. But it's still not that amazing of a campaign. You know, you start small, you have to grow, get the tribes to join you, and then fight Dunland, basically. And it's a fun campaign, but I don't know. It just is lacking something. I think they're a little bit aesthetically, like, they're good. I think the models are very good, the new ones, but it's just not my cup of tea either. I honestly don't think the Wildmen are my favorite, because Dunland's going in F tier. I don't like this faction. Now, it's worth noting that Dunland is currently in the midst of getting all of its changes for version 5. Like, Lord of Links, I think about a week or two ago, put out the first, like, complete iteration of the Dunland script now, and from what I've heard, it's pretty fun. I haven't played it yet, but from what I've heard, it's pretty fun, so they might move up. And also, I know we literally just brought on Bilbo Baggins to be a think his name is Bilbo Baggins. Is his name just Bilbo Baggins? But Master Bilbo as a contributor, not a full-on modder, and he's going to do some model stuff as well to sort of update them. And so I think that Dunedin's gotten a lot of flavor now. You actually get to fight Rohan, but I've heard that they're very difficult, so there's still going to be some changes made. So it's sort of too early to rate them on version 5, but I will say, I think once the version 5 of them is completed, then it'll be a lot more fun. It'll move out of at least F tier for me, probably into like DC tier. I don't see myself loving this faction after all the changes, but I think they'll move up. That being said, all I can really comment on is the version 4.6 of Dunedin, and it's so boring. They've got the United the Clan script just like ended with, but I think their roster is not as exciting because it's just like kind of crappy infantry is like the name of the game with this faction. It's not really a whole lot of flavor there at all. Everything's brown. The aesthetic is just not that great for me. Thematically, there's not much there. It's just really not that good. I just don't like Dunedin. And I think they need major changes, which is what they're getting in version 5. I think were second to last in the least popular faction vote. They were really unpopular, which is why they're getting these changes, and I think it was necessary. So I'm excited to see sort of where they end up in version 5. I think Lynx has already done a lot of great work to improve this faction. So don't let me putting them in F tier make you think that they're going to be bad in version 5, because I think they'll be better. So just fingers crossed. I'll let you guys know. I'll try to play them pretty soon once they're a little bit more complete and give you guys an update. Oh, now we've got the Orcs. I had the Orcs last, as well as the Wildmen, but then I realized I do all my favorite factions and then my least favorite. Because, spoiler alert, the Orcs are also going to be a little bit lower. So I wanted to fill out the tier list so it wasn't just talking up factions and then kind of bringing them down. But Mordor, D tier. I don't think they're one of the worst factions in the game, so they're going to avoid the F tier damnation down there. But they're just so boring to me. Thematically, I mean, they do exactly what they want to do. It's basically the evil counterpart of Gondor, but I think they're less interesting, and I also enjoy good factions more, honestly. Mordor is fine. They're the Orc Sauron faction, but that's it. They get the Nazgul. They don't really have any other scripts. You're fighting Gondor. It's an easy campaign. Enough said. Now Isengard. Isengard is a good faction. They're a really good faction. Thematically, it's awesome. The whole Sauron script, it's one of sort of like the iconic scripts of Divide and Conquer. It's been around forever. With, you know, getting the Nazkai and the Nazgul, it adds a lot thematically. I think their roster is super cool. Everybody loves the old-fashioned Uruk-hai, you know, with the movie designs. The armor just looks so cool. Like, you can't deny Lurtz and Ugluk, awesome generals. Saruman as well. I'm going to try to speed things up a little bit because I think we're already nearing a half hour here, but yeah, Isengard, just a really fun faction. Fighting Rohan as well, also surprisingly fun. It's not that hard for Isengard because you got a lot of armor, but I think they're sort of fun to fight because Isengard is really the only faction that fights Rohan, if that makes sense. So if you want to fight, if you're playing Isengard, you're sort of fighting somebody new, which makes them more interesting. And you also can kind of go anywhere because you don't have to just fight Rohan. You can fight Enedwaith. You can fight Gondor. So, and it ultimately culminates in you getting the ring and taking everybody on. So they're a good faction. We got Moria now. They're another F tier faction. I don't like Moria. They have trash, and more trash. It's a lot more brown. Thematically, there are some thematics there. You get the Kazadim reclamation that comes through. But that's about it. I just don't like their roster, and I don't think like that there's really anything going for them in their campaign. As you might be able to tell, I kind of like elites a little bit more than trash. And currently, Moria is purely in the theoretical phase of version 5. There's been no work done on them. There's a lot of talk. And so there's some very interesting changes that have been discussed, but nothing set in stone, so I'm not going to tell you guys so I don't mislead anyone. Because nothing that's being talked about now is guaranteed to be added in version 5 once it comes out. But some very interesting things being discussed. But currently, they suck, honestly. I've only played Moria like once for 20 turns, and I got bored. It's just not a fun roster. It's not a very flavorful campaign. And there's nothing really unique about them, except for being bad. So, yeah, I probably just offended a Moria fan out there. I'm sorry, but I don't like them very much. They're my least favorite faction in the game, and they were last in the popular vote, so I'm not alone on that one. And I'm happy that they're getting the attention that they deserve. But with that being said, moving on to Gundabad. Gundabad, just like Isengard, really fun faction. I think that they have a lot of the same strengths as Isengard. Even though they lack the iconic ring script, I think there's still a lot of different flavor for them. Because you really get the sense that you absolutely hate dwarves. You also start completely neutral to everyone. So you can kind of make the campaign as easy or as hard as you would like. You can go and fight Angmar if you wanted to. You can fight Erebor, go Dane's Halls. You can fight Anduin, Moria, Woodland Realm. There's so many people that you can choose to fight, ally with, do other things with. There's a lot of good settlements up there as well. Dane's Halls, Gundabad itself, Berzakul, super cool. It's a custom settlement, as well as Gundabad, I believe, and Dane's Halls. Like, those all three are custom settlements. You've got Goblin Town to the south. You know, there's a lot of just interesting places up there. Lots of mines. You're fighting in the mountains. I just think that there's a lot of cool thematics. Their roster's super cool. It's a very good roster as well. Very elite orcs, I think, makes it very interesting. And then they've also got some super, super cool elites. Orc Avengers, awesome unit. Pale Uruks, very, very fun. They've got the movie design armor. And then Half Trolls, super cool. I love the Half Trolls. They're underrated as one of the strongest units in the game, I think. They've got, like, 3 hit points, not very much armor, but really high defense skill. They've got, I think, body piercing javelins. It's either they're like body piercing and they have a large area of effect. They're like human, I guess just say, troll ballistas, basically. It's super cool. They're a really deadly unit, and I think the relative lack of popularity for Gundabad sort of makes them underrated as a super strong unit. But I think Gundabad, really fun faction. Recommend trying them. They're just different. You kind of get to play an evil faction up there in that northern part of the map, and I really like them. I think that they have an interesting flavor. They're another one of the fictional campaigns for DaC, but I think it's done very well. So play Gundabad. They're good. And in version 5, they're about the same. So enjoy. Dol Guldur is about the same as Mordor. I'll move Dol Guldur above Mordor. I haven't really been ordering the tier list, I suppose, across the... Although it's pretty close. I think I would do it something like that. There you go. If you want the ordered tier list, you're getting it. That's the ordered tier list. But anyway, I'll put Dol Guldur above Mordor because I think Dol Guldur has a cooler roster than Mordor, but they also have a little bit less flavor. The Khamul units, all of the shadow units, are really cool. Poison type arrows and stuff, super awesome as well. Sorry, taking another drink of water. And you have a lot of enemies to fight. You start with just Dol Guldur, so you can kind of go anywhere. You can fight Lorien, Anduin, Woodland Realm. If you really wanted to, you could probably fight Gondor, Dorwinion, Dale. Lots of options. Lots of factions that you probably don't generally fight as well. Like, when are you fighting Woodland Realm? I think that was thunder. I don't know if you heard that. It's been storming all day here, eastern United States, but anyway. Yeah, Dol Guldur, you can kind of fight everybody. You got a cool roster. Lots of interesting stuff, but thematically, the campaign, I think, is not as cool as Mordor's, and at the end of the day, it's still just a lot of trash orcs, especially early game. It's not until later game that you get the cool parts of their roster. And I actually think, I said I like starting small way at the beginning when I did Gondor, but I think it kind of hurts Dol Guldur just a little bit, because you kind of got to expand quickly into Mirkwood, and just having Dol Guldur is kind of a slog, I think. Maybe you could start with a bit more territory. Not as much, obviously, as Dol Guldur gets in auto expansion. That would be ridiculous, but anyway. Oh, and you get Nazgul. You get Nazgul, too. So those are fun. But they're not anything to write home about. They're not great, but they're fine. But moving on to a super underrated campaign, and a great one at that, is Khand. Of course, I started a Let's Play of them a while ago, and I got to maybe like turn 60 before I just, life got in the way, honestly. But and I was also playing them in that big DaC hot seat that fell through too. Lots of things fell through last June, but anyway, Khand is super, super fun. Play Khand if you have never played them. The Blue Wizard script is a hell of a lot of fun, and I believe whichever choice you make, you can't really go wrong. Obviously, I think choosing to side with the Blue Wizards makes it more fun, but even so, if you decided to say evil, I think they would be interesting. I've never played it that way, but it just seems to me like they'd be easy but still interesting. But when you side with the Blue Wizards, it really sets off a chain of events that is super fun, super unique. I think they have a really cool roster. Their cavalry is amazing, and they've also, like playing with horse archers, I think it's just unique sort of play style for Khand that you don't get with a lot of other factions. So yeah, a lot of fun to play as Khand. I don't think they're an S tier faction, but I think they're very, very strong. So I highly recommend to anyone trying out Khand if you haven't. Okay, up next, now we have the Arid, and just out of respect, I have to put this faction in A tier, and I know a lot of you are probably not going to be happy about me not putting them in S tier, because they're an extremely popular faction, and honestly, they're a really fun one at that, but they're just not one of my favorites, and that's honestly just the only reason why. They're just not one of my favorites. I think it mostly comes down to roster. It's a cool roster, and of course, you get all of the conscription units to supplement your roster, but Arid base roster is just good. It's not amazing to me because it's extremely infantry focused, even though it looks cool. But sorry, they're not one of my favorites. But that being said, they're still really, really, really good. And so I'm gonna order it like that, but they're still super, super good and a whole lot of fun to play. You can do anything. You got the conscription units as well. It means that you can train 1 million units. You can, like I said, do anything, start your campaign anywhere, fight whoever you want, basically play the game how you want. So it adds just a ton of flavor, and it's also a very high-quality roster still, even though it's not my personal favorite. So there's just so much you can fight with it, and a lot you can do. And it's also pretty difficult if you want it to be, but it's also pretty easy if you want it to be. I think being able to choose your difficulty for these campaigns is always a big bonus as well. So yeah, Arid, I mean, you all know why they're so good. They're so popular. Also, okay, another underrated thing about playing Arid too is it's when you go somewhere, you completely throw off the balance of the map, because Harad will end up eventually swallowing like the south, but also they'll be fighting with the Lamroth for it, so it can get a little interesting. And then wherever you go, it completely like throws off like the balance of the AI. If you play 1 million campaigns, you sort of catch on to how it usually goes around the world, each of the wars. But it's interesting, the alliances and the wars that you make and what you influence kind of has a domino effect going around the world. So it's cool to toggle fog a war when you play them. But yeah, you all know why Arid is so good. I don't think I need to say more. I'm sorry, they're not an S tier faction for me, but out of respect, I mean, they are like objectively one of the best factions in the game, and I think that Galu knocked it out of the park with this one. But anyway, another underrated faction, we've got Harad. And Harad is really, really fun in terms of... you know what? No, they're C tier, but they're still really fun. I like Harad, but I will put them C tier because I thought about it, and what I really like about Harad is their roster. It's super vibrant and colorful, lots of cool, flavorful units. You've got the Hashari, the Trollmen, you've got the good cavalry too. It's just a lot of fun to play with these different units and different tribes. I think uniting these tribes is fun. But gameplay-wise, even though they have a lot of thematics and they have a cool roster, gameplay-wise, they do leave a lot to be desired because you're basically just destroying Mordor and the Lamroth. It's not super hard. I will say you start neutral to Arid in version 5, as every faction does, except for when you play, I believe, if you play as Gondor or Dol Amroth, Arid still is the quote-unquote Umbar faction, as I think that's it. But I think outside of that, Arid is now neutral to everyone, even at the start of the game, even when you're not playing as them, which is super cool. So that might make Harad more interesting, but I haven't played them yet in version 5. I will say, Harad is super fun to play in Shattered Alliances, because you can fight Khand, you can fight Arid, Mordor. There's so many places to go, lots to do, and I think fighting the desert, that area of the map is underutilized. So when you play them in Shattered Alliances, it can be really fun, but in the base campaign, it's not super engaging to play, but they have a cool roster and cool thematics, so it kind of keeps you going. Speaking of cool roster and cool thematics, though, we do have Rune, and they're going to get in the B tier because I think they're sort of just a better version of Harad. They got a really cool roster. The Loke units are super iconic, gold armor. They've got a very well-rounded roster, and as I said with Dale, I really enjoy that. I like having good cavalry, archers, and infantry to play with. So there's just a lot of fun. You're fighting Darwinian and Dale, two factions that I really enjoy playing, so it's fun for me to fight them. You start with just one settlement, which I think is fun for Rune because it adds a bit of challenge. You have to be decisive and expand quickly, but you don't want to overextend yourself and run out of money either. So it's just, all in all, creates a super fun faction. I think that they are just really good. Rune is relatively unchanged from Third Age Total War outside of the Uniting the Clan script, but there's not really that much that needed to be added to them because they were already a super cool faction. So, yeah, nothing else to be said. It's really good. Now, moving on, we've got Angmar. As I kind of put Angmar on its own because I put them with the Evil Men, but I don't know. Maybe I should have put them with the Northmen. They're sort of like a weird mix of like Northmen, Evil Men, and Orcs, which is why Angmar is going to get to the top of, well, behind Harad. They're going to get towards the top of C tier for me. And I know you're like, wait, what? They're like super unique, but they're only going to get towards the top of C tier. I don't like playing Angmar. They're hard, and that's not why I don't like them, but it's just, I don't know. It's a really grindy campaign, and I don't think there's a whole lot of flavor, at least not as much as there could be to the Angmar campaign, because there's so much cool lore surrounding Angmar that I think is not utilized in DaC, unfortunately. But there are super cool, they have a pretty cool roster. I think their general roster is very boring and sort of just generic, but they've got some cool units like the Barrow Wights that they have access to, and there's the Archer unit, the one that Hunvorn has, or no, maybe he has Barrow Wights, but there's another unit that's super cool that I'm completely forgetting. Guardians of Kazadim, also super cool as well. So, like, there are cool units in an otherwise average roster, and I think aesthetically they are very cool. But it's also fun getting to fight Northern Dunedin High Elves and Arid Lewin, but it's also extremely difficult. You're sort of just poor the whole time. I think it's a very grindy campaign. I've only played Angmar once, so it has been a while, but they're fun, but not that great for me, and I think it's just sort of the interesting amalgamation of units that they have that makes them entertaining, because other than that, they don't really stand out. I'm sorry, I know Angmar is a very popular faction. This is probably going to be very unpopular. I think most people would have them in A, maybe B tier, but I just don't love this faction. Speaking of another popular faction that I just don't love is Erebor. Yeah, Erebor is so boring. I love Erebor. It hurts because I want to love Erebor. They've got a aesthetically cool roster. They don't have a fun roster to play with, though. I think axe throwers are super clunky to play. Like, Enedwaith works with the javelins because they have hide anywhere, but you've got like 2 axes per unit for Erebor, and that's like your only range. Enedwaith also gets archers, right? It's not like because they get javelins, they don't get archers. Erebor, because they get axe throwers, they're not getting archers because they're dwarves, right? And so I think it's also, there's not really any scripts to this campaign, and I think there's a lot to be done with Erebor that will be done in version 6, potentially. I don't know. But as it stands, their campaign's just kind of boring. It's very vanilla. That being said, I think they're a good beginner campaign as well. So, you know, if you're new to the game, I highly recommend playing Erebor. And like I said, they have a cool roster, looking not super fun to play. Gameplay-wise, not that great. Flavor's there, though. They're an iconic faction from the books and the movies. So there's that as well. But here's just some ideas of how I think Erebor could become awesome. Honestly, I'm going to get close to the mic for this. I think Erebor, this is a secret, I think Erebor would be super fun with goat riders. I said it. I used to be anti-goat riders, but I think Erebor would be fun with goat riders. My reasoning is, Kazadim, I see them as the most infantry-focused of the Dwarven campaigns. They've got the very defensive infantry, you know, all the Legion units are super cool looking, they're amazing. First Legion as well, like, iconic, amazing, right? And then they've also got the Hithiaglir Beast Hunters, which gives them 2 archer options, as well as some of the options that come through from the Hall of the Seven as well. So it kind of gives Katie a diverse roster, and it gives them a little bit of archer sprinkle with full infantry. Arid Lewin, they're pikes and crossbows. They've got crossbows on lock. That's sort of their iconic thing. I think it'd be kind of cool if Erebor was the Goat Rider faction to differentiate them. It would also play into the fact that Erebor is the aggressive Dwarven faction, as they have higher attacking stats than their kin in the West. I don't think the Goat Riders should be super easy to train. Like, I think Goat Riders should be limited recruitment to like Kirkathal, like Iron Hills and Erebor, and pretty elite. But I think it would be cool if Erebor got them. I think it would just differentiate them from the other Dwarven factions more so roster wise. And I think thematically it could make sense. I know it's very controversial. I'd be interested to hear your guys' thoughts on that. And then also, I think it'd be cool if there was some sort of scripted attack on Erebor and Cirith Cathal from Sauron. There's mention of Sauron offering Erebor the rings, and although the ring script went to Arid Lewin, which I'll get to in a bit, but, you know, so I don't think it should be a ring script, because that I don't like when scripts are copy-pasted. I think, like, that's actually something to me that holds, I meant to mention that holds both these two factions back, in Harad and Rune, is their scripts are copy-pasted from each other, and I think Rune's is just better, and so Harad should get something new than just unite the clans. I think that would add a lot of cool flavor to the campaign that is currently lacking, because although Unite the Clans is fun, you do it for like 8 other factions. So it can get a little repetitive. But, so I think Erebor could get some sort of script that has to do with like the War of the Ring, more so, because they were a major player, and they're right next to Dale. It's a very important... The Lonely Mountain is highly sought after in the Tolkien Legendarium, so... think there's some room to wiggle there. So I think if they got Goat Riders and some sort of scripted attack, they could be very, very cool. But as it stands, the lack of flavor in both their roster and their campaign just makes them an average faction to me. Now, 2 factions left, as I accidentally put the Dark Lord of Mordor in here. We'll put him in S tier now, but you can't place him, obviously. But we got Kazadim, and this is going to be controversial, as I'm putting Kazadim in second place up here in S tier. I love, love, love playing as Kazadim. The flavor for this campaign is through the roof, just like version 5 Darwinian. It's absolutely amazing. The intro script is awesome. It's super cool. I wish it was less buggy, but it's super, super, super fun to play. Very replayable. It gives you 2 options in which way you want to go. It gives it replayability. It's super fun. Expedition to Moria. Then you turtle for about 25, 30 turns. And I know some people don't like that part of the campaign. I enjoy it because, as I'll get to later, I really like Khazad-dûm's roster, and I think thematically it makes sense. You are defending Moria now that you have reclaimed it, and it culminates in the Balrog script, which is another pretty cool script. It's very fun to play, and it's sort of just the culmination of flavor, and I think in terms of flavor, Khazad-dûm is the best faction in the game. There's so much lore and thought put into this faction that sort of makes them thematically interesting. And then once you defeat the Balrog, you've sort of unlocked yourself to do whatever you want. And from that point on, the campaign does get a little basic, but I think for how exciting the first 55 turns are, it's fine. I think it's worth it. And the roster is amazing. As I said earlier, the Legion units are beautiful. I think that it's just... I love fielding hordes and hordes of Legion units. Hethaiaglir Beast Hunters are just cool. That's an awesome name. Hethaiaglir being the Misty Mountains in, I don't know which language, but it means the Misty Mountains in, or the Grey Mountains, in, it's the Misty Mountains, but it means that in one of the Tolkien's languages, and Beast Hunters, just super cool. Thematic unit. First Legion, iconic. The Kazadim units, amazing. There's just so many cool units that this faction gets to play with, that even when the late game is just fighting battles against evil, you get to just take it to Gundabad, take it to Moria, take it to Dunlin, take it to Dol Guldur very effectively, and it's a lot of fun. And I highly recommend everyone has to play this faction at least once. You might not agree that they're one of the best factions in the game like me, but I think the amount of flavor and thought put into this faction makes them worthwhile. Last, but certainly not least, now we have Arid Lewin, and this faction has gotten so many changes because it would have been D tier had it been version 3. In version 4.6 alone, it would have been a B tier faction, because I think that the ring script added a lot of fun flavor to them. But now that they have the Balrog script as well, they're a solid A tier, and they're moving high up in A tier. I love Arid Lewin. They currently have the most interesting gameplay-wise roster out of all of the dwarves, while Khazad-dûm's looks absolutely incredible and is still very fun to play with. It's not as exciting as crossbows and pikes. I mean, come on, that's awesome. Crossbows and pikes are super fun. Broadbeam marksmen, absolute beasts of a unit. Azagul's Tomb Protectors, if you decide to go good, super cool. Grimborn Reavers, if you decide to go evil, also super, super cool. You know, you got the Longbeard Phalanx, the new Balerian Honor Guard, awesome unit. And the new Balrog script is a ton of flavor. The ring script is a ton of flavor. The ring script and the Balrog script also add necessary difficulty to this campaign, and I actually don't think this campaign is a complete dawdle anymore. It is a bit challenging, so it's super, super fun. I really, really enjoy Arid Lewin now with all the flavor put in. It's basically the same reason that I love Kazadim, but I just like Kazadim a little bit better, personally. I think maybe just for nostalgia's sake, but especially when version 5 comes around, I highly recommend that you all play this faction because the amount of flavor and thought put in is, I think, kind of setting the bar for future Divide and Conquer factions alongside Darwinian, the extra flavor that they got in that you don't need massive scripts to make factions interesting. You can have a few little ones, and as long as you put time and thought and effort into them, it's really setting the bar for me on what enjoyable factions can become, because the flavor makes them worth playing. So Arid Lewin, super, super fun faction, highly recommend. And they will be the final faction that I am rating today. So, you know, a lot in the middle of the pack, looking a little bit more towards the top of the pack, but that's how it should be, because like I said, there's a lot of fun factions in this game. I, you know, love playing this mod, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Darwinian, best faction in the game? Can't change my mind. Moria, it's the worst. I'm sorry, but I want to hear what you all think. Thank you so much for coming back and, you know, being patient over the last year as I upload. Like I said, it's purely just something that I do for fun, and I'm happy that I can bring you guys some more content here today. I'll try maybe to start up the individual faction unit tier lists again, because I think those were a lot of fun when I was doing them. So I'll maybe look back into doing something like that. And then the last thing that I just want to update on you guys on as well is I might start uploading different stuff to my YouTube as well, because I do a lot of video content for different things. I am a cinema major, after all, so I might start uploading some of my other projects that aren't just Divide and Conquer focused. If you guys don't want me to do that, I can make a separate channel for all that. But if you guys aren't, you know, it's okay if it's not only Divide and Conquer on this channel. I'd love to start uploading different stuff potentially. So anyway, that will do it for today. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one and around the server. Have a good day.